Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well and are looking forward to today's literacy lesson. Now, before we begin writing the next paragraph of our story, I would like you to have a go at editing the first two sentences on this page. You can see in the first sentence that there are 5 errors, and in the second one there are 2 errors. Please pause the video now and edit the first 2 sentences. Hopefully that's even clearer for you now with the light. Welcome back. You should have now edited those first 2 sentences, and I would expect to see those uploaded along with today's paragraph. Remember, editing and learning from our mistakes ensures that we make maximum progress. Okay, let's look at this first example then. Now, you probably noticed that there were 3 of the same kind of error in this first sentence. What was that error? Well done if you spotted that capital letters were missing both for the names of people and places and at the beginning of sentences. So there was a missing capital letter here at the beginning of the sentence, here for the name of the city, which was Paris in this case, and here for the name of the girl. So all 3 should have been corrected as follows: capital O, capital P, and a capital A for Alma. Now, there were 2 more errors. So let's read through the sentence and check we have all of our punctuation. One snowy day in Paris, that's an adverbial, so well done if you spotted that you should have had a comma there. One snowy day in Paris, a girl called Alma was dancing and skipping down the street. And great job if you managed to spot that skipping was missing a P. Skipping has a double P, so add that in if you didn't manage to see it. And then put your score at the end of the sentence so that your teachers can see how well you achieved and what else you might need support with. Let's look at this second sentence. Now, there weren't as many errors in this sentence, there were only 2. Whilst she explored the area, she saw a huge chalkboard which was covered in names. This sounds like a lovely sentence with an adverbial. However, you can see here that the child has added a full stop. Whilst she explored the area, that is not a sentence by itself. Whilst is a conjunction, a subordinating conjunction, therefore this is a subordinating clause and it needs to be followed by a comma and then a main clause. So let's read it now. Whilst she explored the area, she saw a huge chalkboard which was covered in names. There was an incorrect homophone in the second part of this sentence. What was it? Well done if you noticed it was which. That which stands for or refers to the character, a witch that you might be scared of perhaps. How should which be spelt? Yes, that's right. W-H-I-C-H. Well done if you managed to spot both of those errors. Now, the final sentence is a little bit different in that it doesn't quite make sense. So I want you to have a go at this one independently when I show it to you in just a moment and post up your corrected version on Seesaw, because there are many different ways you could rephrase this sentence and there are many different punctuation marks you could use. So I took this example from a child's work, and I'm hoping you can share your improved version on Seesaw. Let's read it together. Her bright pink jacket lit up the road, as did her nice blue bobble hat, her cheeks as rosy as lilies and nose as cold as ice. So this child has included lots of different ideas, but as you will see, and I'll give you a little bit of a hint here, it lacks punctuation in certain places. Remember, main clauses need to either be joined by a conjunction or a semicolon, or separated by a full stop. So it's up to you how you rephrase these sentences, but I would really like you to have a go at this. Now, once you've completed all of today's edits, you're ready to move on to our next paragraph. Please pause the video now and write today's date and what. Friday the 5th of February, and we are learning to use short, snappy sentences and repetition to build suspense. Now, once you have done that, I would advise going back to the Alma video and watching it one more time. Today, we're going to be writing up to the part where Alma tries to enter the shop. Not where she enters, where she tries to enter but she isn't successful. That is, the last part of our writing today will be the part where she throws the snowball at the shop window in frustration. So you could either watch up to that part or you could watch the whole thing again. When you've done that, you're ready to begin today's writing. Now, it's really important that my writing flows on. So that's why at the top of my page, I've written what yesterday's endpoint was. Yesterday's endpoint, she signed her name on a chalkboard. So I know that I need to move the story on from that point. I don't need to refer to her signing her name on the chalkboard again. Let's now look at the 3 steps that I'm going to include in my writing today. There's a lot in today's writing, so I've written the steps rather than including pictures, but as you're writing, you might want to keep skipping back and forth to the video. So, A stands for Alma. Step number 1, A will be walking towards the shop. Then she will spot the doll, and finally she will try to enter. And as I mentioned when I was discussing the learning objective, our objective or our purpose today is to try and build suspense. And suspense is a feeling of being excited or being anxious or being uncertain about what might happen. And suspense is a really important feature to include in narrative writing because it makes the reader want to keep reading. And we're going to try and use shorter sentences, so vary between shorter and longer sentences, and repetition, because that is they are 2 techniques you can use to effectively build suspense and tension. So let's get started. She walks towards the shop. Now, I'm not going to begin immediately with Alma walked towards the shop. I know that when Alma, because I want to give a little bit more information about what was happening and set the scene a little bit. I know that when Alma signed her name on the chalkboard, she was probably confused at first, but she turned round for a reason. And I think that reason was because she sensed that something wasn't quite right. She had an uneasy feeling in her mind. So I'm going to try and convey that at the beginning of this paragraph. Now I could say, feeling like something was not quite right, Alma turned around. Or as though something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling, Alma turned around and stared at the shop window. I'm actually going to start with a description of the snow. The snow fell clumsily. Because I think at that point the snow started to get a little bit heavier, and that suggested to me that things were about to get a little stranger. The snow fell clumsily through the air. Describing the weather also helps you convey the mood of the story. If it was a bright sunny day, for example, you wouldn't necessarily think that something strange or odd was about to happen. The snow fell clumsily through the air. And something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. Uneasy means worried or anxious. The snow fell clumsily through the air, and something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. And we know that uneasy feeling is the reason why she looked around and actually stared into the shop window. Now, hopefully you've spotted in that first sentence, I've already made a homophone error or mistake because I was writing it down quickly. What is the error I've made with the homophone in the first sentence? Remember, a homophone is a word that sounds the same but has a different meaning. Well done if you spotted it was through. This homophone, the reason I've made this error is because later on we will have to use this through when she threw a snowball. This through is when you throw something like a ball or a bone for a dog. The through we want is this one, so please be really careful with your homophones. T-H-R-O-U-G-H is the through that's required there. Okay, now I've set the scene. The snow's falling clumsily and Alma feels like something isn't quite right. So now I'm going to say she turns around. Let me read back though to make sure my next sentence flows. The snow fell clumsily through the air, and something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. I've used her there, so I'm going to use the girl's name now. Alma turned slowly. Alma turned slowly and looked and stared perhaps at the shop window opposite. I haven't used any short sentences just yet because I don't want to make the reader stop and think just yet. I know there's a moment later on where I want to grab the reader's attention when she spots a doll that looks like her, but for the moment I'm just describing using longer descriptive sentences to set the scene. Alma turned slowly and stared at the shop window opposite. I could now write in a little bit of additional detail about the shop window. I might say something like, she could feel its menacing eyes staring back at her, or she could feel it urging her to come closer. So I might add in that, because this description will also help to make the reader think that something isn't quite right. She could feel its menacing eyes I'm going to say beckoning her. That means tempting her or almost urging her, beckoning her to come closer and get a better look. And at this point, I haven't given too much away. And to get a better look, I haven't said to get a better look at, or I haven't said what she would want to get a better look at. I'm trying to hide some of the details because that's another technique you can use to build suspense. Okay, let's read back what I've written so far then. The snow fell clumsily through the air and something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. Alma turned slowly and stared at the shop window opposite. She could feel its menacing eyes beckoning her to come closer and get a better look. Okay, I'm now at the point where I want her to approach the shop window and spot the doll. So, I'm going to say, and to get a better look, I'm going to jump down and start a new paragraph. Alma approached. Full stop. I'm going to keep that as a short sentence. Alma approached. What did she see then when she approached? Now, at this point, you might say how she pressed her nose against the window, or you might discuss how her warm breath steamed the window up, or perhaps she took off her mittens and she rubbed the windows. It's up to you how much detail you go into at this point. So I've said she approached, and I'm going to say Alma approached and noticed. Alma approached and noticed. I've not and noticed actually. I'm going to say full stop. She noticed a doll staring back at her. Actually, she noticed a doll standing. I've already said the word staring. Standing proudly in the centre of the window. So Alma approached. She noticed a doll standing proudly in the centre, semicolon. This is where I'm going to try and use some repetition. A doll that she thought looked exactly like her, or a doll that looked familiar, or a doll that she hadn't noticed just a moment before. So Alma approached. She noticed a doll standing proudly in the centre. A doll that looked somewhat familiar. I wouldn't actually need a semicolon here because that isn't going to be a main clause by itself. So you can just use a comma to use that repetition. A doll that looked somewhat familiar. Okay, so we're now on to step 2 where Alma spots the doll. So I'm going to change colour to help you. And I should have really started it, well, from this point. Step 2 is really where she spots the familiar doll, okay? The reason why she moved closer in the first instance is because she thought there might have been something there, but step 2 is when she really notices the doll that looks like her. And if you watch back in the video, you'll see how her reaction really changes at that point. She's shocked, but actually she's quite happy about it. She looks back up and a little small, excited smile comes across her face. So she spots the doll. How am I going to introduce this part? And this is the part where I want to try and build the suspense even more, because of course it is very strange that a doll would look exactly like the person who is looking at it. So it's important to convey that, to ensure that the reader feels tension at this point. So a doll that looked somewhat familiar. Now, I could say Alma spotted that the doll looked like her, but I'm imagining at this point, what's she going to be doing? Well, her mouth is probably she's just spotted a doll which looks familiar. Her mouth is probably gaping open in shock. Her eyes probably widening. So I'm going to say, eyes widening. Eyes widening. She gazed up. Or she gazed back up, or she looked back up. She gazed up at the doll. And at this point, I'm going to use a short sentence to make the reader stop and think. And I'm going to use a dash to introduce it. It was her. Or you could say, the doll was dressed in an identical miniature of her own clothing. Eyes widening, she gazed up at the doll. It was her. Or you could say everything was the same. The gilet, the hat, the mittens. So, eyes widening, she gazed up at the doll. It was her. Now, how was she feeling at that point? I'm going to say a small, excited smile. I know she was quite happy initially to see the doll. A small, excited smile played momentarily on her lips, or across her face, or spread across her face. Played momentarily on her lips. But Look back on the video if you're not sure what happens at this point. As soon as she noticed that the doll looked like her, and as soon as that smile spread across her face, what happened? Yes, that's right. It was gone. So I'm going to use but now, an opposite conjunction, and say, but the doll was gone. But the doll was gone. And now I'm going to introduce a shorter sentence to increase the suspense, and one sentence and a sentence that also uses repetition of the idea that the doll was gone. I'm not going to say it was gone one more time. I'm going to say it had completely disappeared. So that's a 4-word sentence, and it repeats the idea that the doll was gone, so that the reader will stop and think that this is not right. We want to emphasise the idea that the doll has completely disappeared, because that is a strange thing to happen. It had completely disappeared. Now, at this point, you might add in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to add in a little bit more detail. Before I say she raced to the door, you could jump on to the fact now she went straight to the door, but I'm going to say that she tried to look in the window first of all to see where it had gone. So, because including a mix of shorter and longer sentences helps to increase the suspense even more, because the reader will think, okay, the longer sentences slows it down, and then the shorter sentences quickly speed up the pace. Peering through several panes of glass, or you could say peering through the window, peering through several panes of glass, panes of glass. You might say here, she looked to try and find whether the doll had fallen off its stand, but it was nowhere to be seen. So instead of saying she looked, I'm going to say she craned her neck, because when you crane your neck, you try to do something, you look in desperation, and I definitely think that's the right phrase for how she was feeling. Peering through several panes of glass, she craned her neck to see if it had fallen, because of course that would be your first reaction, to see if it had fallen, if it had fallen from the stand. But it was nowhere to be seen. Now at this point, I'm hoping that the reader is thinking, what is going on here? Something is not quite right. So let's read back what we have written so far before we complete our final part of this paragraph. Okay, hopefully you can all see that nice and clearly. The snow fell clumsily through the air, and something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. Alma turned slowly and stared at the shop window opposite. She could feel its menacing eyes beckoning her to come closer and get a better look. Alma approached. She noticed a doll standing proudly in the centre, a doll that looked somewhat familiar. And there's our first example of repetition there, to really emphasise the point that we're trying to make. The doll was exactly like her. Eyes widening, she gazed up at the doll. It was her. Short sentences again. A small, excited smile played momentarily on her lips, but the doll was gone. It had completely disappeared. An example of a short sentence that will add to the suspense, because of course it's very strange indeed for a doll to just disappear off a shelf. Peering through several panes of glass, she craned her neck to see if it had fallen from the stand, but it was nowhere to be seen. Now we know that step 3 is to move on to the part where she tries to enter the shop. So what does she do next? Let me move this up for you so you can see my writing, and I will switch back to grey so it's easier for you to follow. Okay, I'm now going to say she raced to the shop door, and the word race tells me that she was going at quite a fast speed. So I'm going to say, or you might say without a second thought, she raced to the door. So what adverbial could I use? I could say without a second thought, or you might say dismayed. She raced to the door. Or you could say confused. Any of those words would work to describe that. So without a second thought, she raced to the door. Well, I don't need both of those because they both mean similar. If you're doing it without a second thought, you are doing it quickly. So I'm going to say, without a second thought, she, how could you describe the way in which she moved over to the door? What might you say? Have a think. You could say she trundled towards the door. You could say she made her way across towards the door. She didn't quite skip towards the door, so that wouldn't be appropriate. But do have a think how you would indicate how she made her way across to the door. Or you could say raced if you didn't say without a second thought. Without a second thought, she made her way over to the door. She made her way over to the door, or made her way towards the door, and tugged it. Tugged, of course, means pulled it open. And tugged it. Now, tell me what happened when she tugged the door, because this is another part we want to create suspense. So we really want to try and use our short sentences here so that the reader feels uncertain about why something has happened. Normally, when you open a door or when you tug a door, it opens. In this case, it didn't. So we want to get the reader thinking, once again, that something unusual is happening. Tell me, what happened when she tugged the door? Yes, you're right. She wasn't able to get in. So I'm going to continue by saying, but without a second thought, she made her way towards the door and tugged it. And at this point now, I'm going to say, but nothing. It was stuck. Or in fact, I'm just going to use one word here. Nothing. It was stuck. Full stop. And there are my short sentences to really add to that suspense and tension. Now, I might then say, nothing, it was stuck. Nothing, full stop. It was stuck. I'm actually going to use a dash there to emphasize a point I want the reader to think about. As though something, and we know that something is an empty word, which also helps to build suspense. We actually use that really effectively in our Frances Diary entries. As though something was holding it from the inside. Was holding it from the inside. Now, she doesn't throw the snowball until she tries again. So, I'm now going to say, she tried the handle again. Hopefully you can see that clearly. She tried the handle again. Full stop. Still no movement. And you can see how I'm repeating the same ideas from before. Back here it was stuck, in the back here it was stuck, and once again no movement, and I'm using my short sentences to emphasise this point. So she tried the handle again, still no movement. And then, as we know, she threw a snowball. Now I want to be really careful not to start with she again, because I've already used she to start the previous sentence. So instead I'm going to say how Alma was feeling. I might say frustrated, or you could say, disappointment weighed heavily on her shoulders and she threw a snowball. Okay, so I'm going to actually start with frustrated. Or you might start with confused and frustrated. So a feeling sentence opener. She threw a snowball. Tell me, how do I spell the threw if you throw something? Yes, you're correct, T-H-R-E-W. She threw a snowball at the, and I'm actually going to describe the window as the teasing window, so that the reader begins to think that there's something in the shop, or that the shop definitely wants her to come in, at the teasing window. And that's the point at which we are going to stop. So let's read back today's paragraph. Now remember, I would encourage you to watch the video up to the point where she throws the snowball numerous times to make sure you're really confident with the plot and how Alma's feelings change throughout. It's really important that you know the moments where we need to build suspense, those moments where we want the reader to think that something's not quite right. Let's read back my model then. And remember that your model, today's work, has to flow on from yesterday's. The snow fell clumsily through the air, and something behind her gave her an uneasy feeling. Alma turned slowly and stared at the shop window opposite. She could feel its menacing eyes beckoning her to come closer and get a better look. And at this point, you might even include how she's feeling. Uncertainty clawed at her stomach like a cat in the bag. You might include some show not tell to describe just how she's feeling yesterday, or at that point, sorry. Alma approached. She noticed a doll standing proudly in the centre, a doll that looked somewhat familiar. Eyes widening, she gazed up at the doll. It was her. A small, or you could say, an exact miniature. A small, excited smile played momentarily on her lips, but the doll was gone. It had completely disappeared. Peering through several panes of glass, she craned her neck to see if it had fallen from the stand, but it was nowhere to be seen. Without a second's thought, she made her way towards the door and tugged it. Nothing. It was stuck, as though something was holding it from the inside. Perhaps it was the same thing that was holding Frances's oars. She tried the handle again. Still no movement. Frustrated, she threw a snowball at the teasing window. And then tomorrow we will continue our narrative. Okay, that's us for today. I really hope you have enjoyed the lesson and that you have come away with lots of ideas for your narrative. If you're not sure, go back and replay the video at specific points, and perhaps you can jot down ideas for each of the paragraphs. We're all really looking forward to seeing your work today, Year 6, as always on Seesaw. Have a great rest of the day, and remember, if you do have any questions or queries about the literacy, you can always write a comment under your work and hopefully either I or your teachers will spot it. Well done for making it through to the end of the lesson, and have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.